the Ritz, and it'd just be one Mercedes, leaving our two security vehicles outside the front. He would leave with the Princess Dori and Henri Paul driving, and then after 5 minutes I would follow on with the security vehicles.
And what was the point of that plan?
Well, as they were beginning to move, I was to make a show out the front of bringing our vehicles forward, flashing the 5-minute sign to them to focus everyone's attention on the front of the Ritz.
So it was to draw the photographers
Draw everyone's
away
eye
from the couple leaving at the back.
Yeah, and it was a good plan, and it did
give
work.
them some privacy, presumably.
Yeah.
Henri Paul waited by the back door with Diana and Dodi as the car was brought round. He was a trusted and loyal employee of the Al Fayed family.
At the Ritz, you don't say no, especially not to the boss. When the boss arrives, everything has to be perfect. If the boss says something needs doing, it gets done. If Dodi told Paul to drive him, you would never say no, and certainly not, no, I've been drinking, I can't drive.
Some people have said that the Ritz is a very hierarchical structure, and that if Mr. Al Fayed Sr. or his son Dodi had given an order to do something, no one would dare disobey, and that perhaps Mr. Paul felt that he had to drive even though he wasn't fit to drive.
That wasn't the case. The security people really act professionally. The bodyguards would not have allowed Henri Paul anywhere near that car had they suspected he'd been drinking, nor would Dodi Fayed have allowed him anywhere near that car.
At midnight, the plan swung into action. The couple, their driver and Trevor Rhys-Jones left the back of the Ritz. As Diana walked to the car, the 3 photographers were waiting. 2 moved forward to take pictures. The police have these pictures. They're believed to show Rhys-Jones pulling down the sun visor, apparently shielding his face, and Diana looking out of the back of the car. Just what happened at the beginning of the drive from the Ritz is unclear. Did the photographers, taking their flashlit pictures, goad Henri Paul, who'd been drinking, into rash action? Did Dodi Al Fayed, irritated by the constant presence of the photographers, urge his chauffeur to lose them? Or was it Henri Paul alone who made the decision? One thing is clear. Quickly, the Mercedes gathered speed. Seconds later, the security camera records the scene at the front of the Ritz. Mobiles ring, rumour sweeps the press pack. The couple have gone. The decoy cars move off slowly. Some photographers stay with them, but others have already gone in search of Diana's car.
We decided to follow the 2 cars since we knew already that Dodi and Diana were gone, since the other photographers were gone as well.
Au bout d'un moment, je me suis aperçu que certains photographes qui travaillaient en équipe avec d'autres photographes qui étaient à l'arrière de l'hôtel avaient disparu. Je me suis donc dit que le couple avait dû sortir par l'arrière de l'hôtel. Et donc, je suis monté sur la moto et je suis parti pour essayer de les retrouver.
The route that Henri Paul intended to take was from the Rue Cambon into the Place de la Concorde and around the square, then along the fast-moving Riverside Road to the Place de l'Alma, turning north to Dodi's apartment on the Champs-Élysées. As the Mercedes reached the bottom of the Rue Cambon, only one paparazzi on a scooter was behind it. But coming from the front of the Ritz, Romuald Ra, riding pillion, turned on to the same road and caught up with the car at the lights.
En arrivant au croisement de la place de la Concorde et des Champs-Élysées, c'est vrai que j'ai vu une Mercedes avec à l'intérieur la princesse et monsieur Al Fayed. Et cette Mercedes, dès que je suis arrivé, elle est partie très vite. Il y avait quelques photographes qui étaient là.
As the lights changed, Mr. Ra was away first behind the Mercedes. 2 photographers in a Fiat and the paparazzi on the scooter were behind him. But Romuald Ra says that he and the others dropped back as the Mercedes gathered pace along the Riverside Road. It was a well-known route for chauffeurs trying to outrun the press. The police believe the car reached speeds around 80 miles an hour, almost 3 times the speed limit. But they say there's no verification from radar checks or traffic cameras. Mr. Ra says he didn't see the car again. It was too far ahead. The Mercedes entered the tunnel under the Place d'Alma. What happened just prior to the Mercedes entering the tunnel may never be known. But Henri Paul lost control of the car at high speed on a dangerous curving road. It's increasingly clear it was not the photographers, even though they were only 200 meters or so behind, who caused that loss of control. However, what they did afterwards is open to question. The entrance to the tunnel is on a bend, and the road drops sharply. Inside there's a wall on the right and a close-set row of pillars on the left, no crash barrier in front of them. The police believe the car hit the 3rd pillar on the left, then ploughed on, hitting the 13th pillar, almost head-on. It then spun round, ending up facing the wrong way, its front badly mangled, though the back was relatively intact. Romuald Ra believes he arrived about 40 seconds later, followed by 3 other photographers. Mr. Ra is a qualified first aider.
Avec la moto, on a dépassé la voiture, on s'est garé, et je suis descendu de la moto et j'ai couru vers la voiture. À ce moment-là, j'ai pensé qu'ils étaient tous morts. J'ai eu un choc pendant quelques secondes. Je me suis un petit peu écarté de la voiture. Et au bout d'un petit moment, je me suis repris et j'étais vers la voiture pour ouvrir la porte. Parce que je voulais voir ce que je pouvais faire, essayer de leur porter secours.
Who did you go to? Which of the occupants of the car?
Vous êtes allé vers qui d'abord?
Je suis allé vers l'arrière de la voiture. J'ai ouvert la porte arrière droite parce que c'était la seule porte visiblement que je pouvais ouvrir.
And what did you see? What did you do?
Qu'est-ce que vous avez vu? Qu'est-ce que vous avez fait?
Donc, quand j'ai ouvert la porte, j'ai vu que pour le chauffeur et Monsieur Al-Fayed, ils étaient visiblement morts et je ne pouvais rien faire. Et je me suis donc penché sur la princesse pour voir si elle était vivante.
Then what did you do?
Et après, qu'est-ce que vous avez fait?
Donc, je me suis penché sur elle pour essayer de prendre son pouls. Et au moment où je l'ai touchée, la princesse a bougé, elle respirait. Je lui ai donc parlé en anglais. Je lui ai dit « I'm here, be cool, doctor will arrive ».
Did anybody call for help on the mobile phone?
Est-ce qu'il y avait quelqu'un qui appelait pour les secours sur le téléphone portable?
Personnellement, je n'ai pas appelé les secours, tout simplement parce que, après avoir regardé dans la voiture, j'ai entendu quelqu'un dire « j'ai appelé les secours ». C'est pour ça que je ne les ai pas appelés une deuxième fois. La première fois était largement suffisante.
Within another minute or so, a car approached the tunnel from the opposite direction. It was driven by Frédéric Maillet, a French emergency doctor. With him, an American friend.
It just passed the Eiffel Tower. It was a beautiful night. And we were coming toward the tunnel, which goes underneath the Pont d'Alma, the intersection at the Pont d'Alma. And in front of us, we could see that there was smoke in the tunnel. So as we rolled past, we could see that there weren't any emergency services there yet. Frederick quickly stopped the car, and he got out to assess what was going on.
So I went to the car. I saw there were 2 presumably dead people and 2 severely injured. So I ran back to my car, phoned the fireman brigade, asked them for 2 ambulances, 2 emergency ambulances, and took some equipment in my trunk. And I ran back to the car to give the first aid to the victims. There was already volunteer fireman who was treating the person who was severely injured and who was sitting on the front right. of the car. So I didn't have to choose, and I treated the young lady who was on the left rear back.
And what was going on around you at this time?
People were gathering and they began to take some pictures.
J'ai porté secours. Ensuite, il y a des secours professionnels qui sont arrivés, qui passaient là par hasard, qui sont arrivés. Et donc, à partir du moment où eux prenaient les choses en charge, je me suis reculé. Et c'est à partir de ce moment-là où j'ai repris mon métier de journaliste.
So you picked up your camera and you started to take pictures.
Vous avez repris votre appareil, vous avez commencé à prendre des photos.
Voilà, à partir de ce moment-là, j'ai fait des photos de la scène de l'accident.
I'd say we were I was 5 or 6 meters away from the car, so I could see the panorama of what was happening. More and more people gathering around. That's when I started to see photographers. I started to see people taking pictures with professional cameras.
How many photographers would you estimate there were?
Well, at first there were 2 or 3, and very quickly, in the minute or 2 or 3 after our arrival, there were many. I'd say at the most I remember between 12 and 15.
Were you conscious of the people around you taking the pictures being close to you or a long way away?
I think they were very close.
Did it put you off doing your work? Did it distract you?
No, they didn't bother me, they didn't hamper me, no.
3 American tourists in a car travelling the other way now took some pictures of the scene. It was 10 minutes after the crash, and 2 policemen on local patrol had arrived. In a confidential report, they later described the behaviour of some of the photographers as aggressive and
The camera seemed to be the angry one, and he was trying to push or trying to hit the photographer. I didn't understand what they were saying. There was a lot of noise in the tunnel at that time. There started to be more pandemonium, panic, and with the echo in the tunnel, I didn't hear what they said.
The tourists' pictures show a man with a camera behind his back and a policeman remonstrating with another photographer, camera over his shoulder. By now there were several onlookers and a group of photographers milling about. Anything else you remember about this scene around the car?
I do remember that this same photographer, because I had taken note of him during this little altercation, I saw this same tall photographer go over to the car after that, and he was the one that I do remember that went the closest to the car with his camera.
How close?
Within half a meter.
With a long lens?
With a long telephoto lens, very long one like that, and very, very close. I mean, he practically stuck his camera in the car.
Eight minutes after the accident, the fire brigade arrived on the scene. Their trauma unit got there 3 minutes later. Now, 2 photographers from the Lawrence Solar Agency arrived. They shot close-ups into the car before quickly leaving.
Ils ont fait à eux deux entre 30 et 40 photos, je ne sais pas exactement. Et un officier de police est venu leur dire « Ok, vous avez fait votre travail, maintenant vous partez ». C'est pour ça qu'ils n'ont pas été inquiétés comme les autres. Ils n'ont jamais été attrapés, ils n'ont pas essayé de partir. On leur a dit « Vous avez fait votre job, ok, maintenant c'est fini, vous partez ». Et ils sont partis. À ce moment-là, ils n'ont pas considéré qu'ils avaient fui. Simplement, ils étaient partis parce qu'on leur avait demandé de partir.
15 minutes after the crash, all the emergency services were in place. They did not need to cut Diana from the car. Up above the tunnel, the slower decoy convoy was now passing, other photographers in tow.
After about a couple of minutes, we saw there was an accident on our left, just down in the tunnel, because the emergency services were there. So I immediately called forward to the apartments, asking if the party were there. They said they weren't, so I said, well, they've probably taken a detour because there has been an accident.
Et là, j'étais un peu déçu. J'ai dit, bah, je l'ai perdu, je rentre à la maison, je suis fatigué, je verrai ça demain. Donc, pour rentrer à l'agence ici, je suis obligé de reprendre les quais. Et je prends les quais et je tombe sur le motard de Gamma d'Armont. Je ne comprenais pas pourquoi il était là. Et je regarde comme ça sous le tunnel, je vois une voiture, mais puis je dis, mais ça a dû être terrible, l'accident, là. Et lui, il me regarde, il me dit c'est Diana. J'ai fait ce que je pense tout photographe aurait fait à ma place. J'ai garé ma moto, je suis descendu à pied. En descendant, j'ai fait 5-6 vues. Mais j'ai pas allumé mon flash. Là, il y avait déjà sur place les premiers secours. Il y avait la police. Ils nous ont mis à l'écart. Ils nous ont pris nos appareils photo. Ils nous ont mis dans un car. Voilà.
6 photographers and 1 driver were arrested. They were placed under investigation for manslaughter and also for failing to help the victims of an accident. They were driven away in a van.
On parlait pas. On parlait pas, on était... On revenait pas de l'accident. C'était impossible que ça soit elle. On s'est dit, c'est pas possible, c'est inimaginable. On se dit, mais c'est pas possible. Je veux dire, on n'aurait jamais cru que l'accident allait causer sa mort, à elle comme à lui.
The 2 paparazzi who'd escaped arrest were back at Laurent Sola's agency, anxious to get their exclusive pictures into the computer and out across the world. They'd followed the princess since her arrival in Paris, but they knew the new pictures of Diana injured in the wreckage, though controversial, could be literally priceless.
J'attendais les films de la journée, de leur journée de travail. Et évidemment, ils étaient un peu paniqués. Et tout de suite, le débat a porté sur l'opportunité de diffuser ces photos ou pas. Au bout de plus de 2 heures de débat, on est arrivé à l'accord, à la solution de diffuser 5 photos de la princesse Diana dans la voiture, blessée dans la voiture. Et j'ai commencé à commercialiser ces photos vers 3h30, 4h moins le quart du matin. Il était impossible d'imaginer que la princesse Diana allait mourir quelques heures plus tard. Parce que il y a effectivement beaucoup de monde sur ces photos et on aperçoit son visage dans la voiture, derrière le siège du conducteur, et son visage est intact.
An hour after the accident, an ambulance left the tunnel. It had taken a specialist team that long to stabilize the princess. There was no untoward delay, contrary to reports. Then she was taken very slowly to the hospital. She had severe internal injuries, and a further 2 hours of efforts by the medical team were unsuccessful. Diana's death was made public at 6 in the morning.
Tonight's accident is a terrible tragedy. The death of the Princess of Wales fills us all with deep shock and with deep grief.
In the immediate aftermath of the crash, the paparazzi were blamed. A witness claimed he'd seen a bike swerve in front of the car. His evidence is now considered unreliable. The speedometer was said to be jammed at 120 miles an hour. It was, in fact, at 0. After 3 positive blood alcohol tests, the Ritz driver, Henri Paul, is now the focus of the inquiry. But for those close to Dodi and Diana, the press remain the real culprits.
I think if anyone is to be blamed, it should be whoever.